there's a lot of places now that are actually doing like virtual consultations. Like even there's some chiropractic care that are doing that now. Yeah. Tell me that the most hands-on type of treatment in the world, they're doing virtual stuff.
Well, I mean, I think if you got enough, like, you can get a good. Probably can't hear it there, but I can adjust a certain way up.
I think there's a little bit more to that, but anyways,
Gotcha.
Not a big deal. All right, you good to go?
Yep.
All right, guys. Welcome back to Silver Bullet Podcast. James and Colton sitting here today. We mentioned 2 weeks ago that we were going to probably go into this style of podcast, or excuse me, this podcast specifically today, because we got talking about physiologically why you crave, quote unquote, junk, crave bad or poor food. And we got a lot of
the tasty stuff.
Yeah, and everybody knows what we're talking about, the tasty stuff. Why at the end of middle of the night you just crave some Haagen-Dazs, or why you want a cookie before you go start your bedtime routine, stuff like that. And a lot of people think it's kind of just what I do, it's my lifestyle, but I'm here to tell you there's a lot more physiological stuff happening than you think.
Do you think that there's a difference?
You're smiling. This is about to be a bad question.
There's a craving, and like we're going to unfold a lot of that, like why do you crave what you crave? But I think some of it is, do you think it's a desire? Like I want, because for ice cream, I don't know that I always have a craving. I'm just being honest. Like sometimes I'm like, I just want some ice cream.
Yeah.
I'm not craving it at all. I'm just going to eat it.
Yeah. Well, I might argue that there's some physiologically going on in there.
It greatly affects my next day's workout, having some,
in a positive
some carb
way?
loading. So yeah, sometimes I just need some ice cream.
All right, so we're gonna talk a little bit about that craving thing. Now, I have 3 things that I want to talk about and bring up, and I know James has a couple, and one that really kind of coincides with one of my points. And craving is an interesting thing, because when you talk about what a craving is, it's like a heightened sensitivity signal to your brain that says this is something that we want, and we want it now, and we want it in a very bad way, and we'll just about do anything in order to obtain that, right? So when you're talking specifically about food, you have to kind of go backwards a little bit and figure out, well, what created this circumstance, right? Was it literally the very first time that you ever had ice cream that was like, this is it? This is going to be it for me.
I love the Schwan Man.
It was the Schwan Man. See, we figured it out already.
Apparently, I'm one of the Schwan Man's children. That's what my parents always said.
So you roll yourself back into figuring out, okay, is this food, this thing? Okay, if I asked you and said, what are the things that you crave? And everybody's got something. Okay, and it's a little bit different. You're more of a sweet tooth person. I'm more of a salt tooth person. So we differ in that opinion. But it's you roll back into figuring out, okay, is it a one instant thing that just, a cute thing where I had this and I'm like, it changed my life forever? Or is it something that you were environmentally kind of groomed into doing?
Yep.
And there's a reason that I say that. We are a product of our environment. I think you'd be silly not to acknowledge that in some capacity. And more specifically, we are a reflection of our youth, our parents, our family, our gathering, our social hub, so to speak. And believe it or not, in a lot of different social gathering places, there are people doing different things than what your family does or what your family does or anything like that. It's kind of crazy, right?
Sometimes when you bring them together, it's not. Sometimes it's a beautiful thing, and sometimes it can be a little bit of a mess.
Headbutting, right?
Yeah.
So that's where you have to kind of look back in that realm too. Okay, I'm not going to pick on my family. I just have an excellent point here, or an excellent example. My family, we were meat and potatoes people. Grew up on a farm. That's all we ate. I ate out of a crock pot, I'm pretty sure, from 3rd grade until I was a senior, because I was number 2 of 6 kids. We were at a ballpark somewhere all the time. Crock pot, best thing in the world. And desserts weren't like something that we had, because literally all we had was in a crock pot. That was it. That was food, and that's all we got.
Yeah.
Right? So I look back into my realm. I'm like, man, I didn't have a sweet tooth at all, and I think it's where it started. I can go to all of my siblings, and nobody really has a quote-unquote sweet tooth. Now, not picking on my wife, love her to death, she has a sweet tooth, okay? And I look back now that I've gotten to know her family and a lot of her relatives that are around the area. Her family, they're dunkers and dippers when it comes to food, right? And if you
Sauce boss.
it's kind of one of those things, but they have a great sweet tooth for dunking anything in milk, right? Cookies in milk, donuts and coffee, dunk, dip, any of that stuff, right? That was established eons ago through her, grandfather. Love him to death. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. But you can go backwards and find your eating style, and the things that you crave often began somewhere other than what you think they did. Right?
There's so many connections. This is, in my opinion, this is one of the most difficult things to work with and through with someone, is that attachment to periods in time. Because that is a very important thing. Like we hold on to those relationships, and sometimes if it's someone that maybe we've lost, or there's a lot of respect there, and something you want to remember. Like I think about my great grandma. Like one thing I always say that I will never give up. Like my wife does a phenomenal job making them now, but like homemade cookies. Like they taste just like Granny's, and so but that takes me to a place in my childhood of like good time, not that time's bad. You get what I'm saying. But equally as much, I can look at a picture and have the same response and not need to eat the food.
And so this is where the whole quote-unquote emotional attachment to food comes in, because oftentimes we look for an emotional release with the food that we consume, and oftentimes those foods are not they're usually not of great quality. Not usually, sometimes, but not usually.
The cookie doesn't bring Granny back.
No, it doesn't.
There
are a lot of things that can keep your your psyche kind of intact with that time period.
Right.
But there's an equal opportunity elsewhere, like you said. Okay, we have a bunch of scrapbooks, a bunch of photo albums where I'm kind of a picture person too. I like going through those and looking through. Like whenever I go to my parents' house, I'll honestly tell you right now, my wife watched me do it last weekend. I find old newspaper clippings from when I was in high school, and they're writing stuff, and I just wanted to read it again because it's fun to go down memory lane. But I can tell you right now, I'm not going to go drink a 24-ounce Mountain Dew before a football game, because that's what I used to do to go down that lane. Right? So it's one of those things where food cravings, they happen. We know they're here. The first problem, or the first thing you have to do to fix a problem, is identify that it exists. Right there, we crave stuff. And where they come from are a little bit different for different people. But this is where I think most of them are created. They come from your upbringing around friends and family, and you didn't even know it was happening. Okay, and while there are plenty of other good things that happen with your upbringing, this is one of the things that really give people struggles when they're talking about trying to lose weight, lose body fat, improve their health, anything. Do you agree? So now that we've kind of talked about it a little bit, okay, where does it come from? That's where I primarily believe that it comes from. There are some other nitpicky little places, but we'll save that one for
we'll work on the heavy hitters today.
So why don't you go ahead and ring off now? For average person that's listening to this, why do they get cravings? We know where they started from and why they've developed, but why do they continually get them?
Most of the clients that I deal with, usually the reason that they're having a lot of their specific food cravings result from them not eating enough nourishing, rich foods, nutrient-dense foods. Therefore, they're lacking a lot of nutrients in what they consume. So their energy levels are going to be low. If that continues on for too long, along with just like external stressors, we start to have some hormonal dysregulation, dysfunction, lack of function. Cortisol's jacked up. I'm trying to paint an easy picture here. But basically, what I'm getting at, individuals cope with carbs due to a cortisol imbalance.
Yeah. So cortisol is the stress hormone. Okay. And you've heard us, if you listen to any of our podcasts, we probably talked about it at least once on every podcast, because it is the ultimate hormone that we're trying to battle each and every day with the majority of our members, right? Cortisol is a good thing. You got to have it. But there are plenty of times where it gets way too elevated and it's not consistent, and the regulation of that hormone is out of whack, that it can have some catastrophic effects to the body. So one of the things that I had on my notes that I knew would play really well into that is that, cortisol being your fight or flight hormone, when it is essentially secreted, your body, a couple of things happen physiologically. Your heart rate increases, your respiratory rate increases, you have vasodilation, which means your blood vessels get bigger, more blood flowing, more oxygen. That's why your heart rate increases and usually your blood pressure, right? So all these things happen just because you saw a snake on the ground. Like in a matter of an instant, it happens. But that's good. You need that to happen.
Right.
The problem is if you constantly are living in that state, there's a problem. But your body being the smartest thing ever created, it knows how to mitigate that, okay? How to make that come down, okay? And there's a lot of overall tips and tricks that you can do to help manage cortisol, like rest, lie down, fasting sometimes can be really beneficial. There's a lot of little tricks that you can acutely bring it down.
Proper breathing.
Belly breathing. There you go, diaphragmatic breathing. But there is actually one thing that can help get it down really quickly, and that's carbohydrates. Okay, carbohydrates, especially fast-acting carbohydrates, ones that are very easily digestible and raise your blood sugar in an instant, it can mitigate the effects of cortisol, okay? So it is no surprise that when cortisol is high and you are, quote-unquote, stressed, that you want crap. Right. You want junk food, and you want the things that are, they bring me back to an emotional state. No, your body physiologically is telling you that you need those because your cortisol levels are probably a little too high for its liking.
Yep. That's a very hard thing to get individuals to grasp, though, because if they've been on this place or on this journey for coping with the elevated cortisol, and their way of dealing with it is to eat said food, and their rationale is, okay, well, I feel fine, I can control it, I can manage it, nothing's wrong, I'm not stressed. But if you start to take those things away, that individual is just they really can't function very well in the absence of those specific types of foods. And again, it's not until they really wrestle with that and unravel what is going on, and to start working on more of the root cause, and to again not just treat the day, if you will.
Yeah. I had an excellent example of that with somebody that I'm working with right now. Removing a lot of that stuff is obviously the hardest part for a lot of people. Removing the fast food, removing the sodas, removing the sugar in general, any flour baked goods, it's super hard, and your body did become accustomed to utilizing that for a long time, and when you take that away, it's a struggle. It is hard, but it does go away. And one of my clients finally hit that point over the weekend, and she just lost it. Was a huge success over the weekend, and she essentially texted me all the things that she was able to do this weekend and the rest that she had, how good she feels, and it was the drop of a hat it happened. And I think that was a span of 13 days, of it being removed. It was an awesome moment, for me to receive that, but that was exactly what was happening here.
Right.
Your body does become used to the things that you're consuming, and your body learned how to cope with the crap you gave it, essentially. So, your body, like the bicycle spoke wheel, when you aren't eating the food that has the nutrients your body needs to sustain itself, one of the spokes on that wheel is just a little bit shorter. And when that wheel goes around, because it'll still go around, one area is going to continually get repeated stress until it breaks.
Yep.
And then you have a problem. We fixed the spoke on that wheel just simply by doing that. And so now the body's actually starting to perform optimally.
Yeah.
And that surrounded cortisol, essentially, in a number of different ways, not just the food, but that was one of the things that we were told. So cortisol, yeah, real big player in why you crave stuff.
Yeah.
Let me think real quick before we move on to the next one. What are ways that you can mitigate that without having that junk late at night? Because everybody knows somebody that wants the ice cream or the cookies or whatever right before you go to bed, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm sleepy now, I'm good, right? One of the things that you can do, stop drinking caffeine past 10 a.m. That is a big one. Huge one. Melatonin and cortisol compete with each other as far as who has a higher elevation. Cortisol in the morning is what gets you out of bed. Melatonin's at its lowest point because it can't keep you asleep, whereas at the end of the day, melatonin should be highest and cortisol should be lowest, so that way you start your sleep routine, right? If you're essentially consuming caffeine, depending on how quickly you metabolize caffeine, if it's still in your system, melatonin and caffeine compete for the same receptor sites in the brain, and so that's why caffeine works. It blocks your sleep hormone from working, essentially.
Right.
So guess what happens when it's 9 o'clock, it's still dark out, and you actually still have caffeine in your system, which, believe it or not, if you're drinking coffee past 2 o'clock, you probably do.
For sure.
You're not going to bed. You're not going to bed. So that would be one easy one. Don't be drinking coffee past 2 p.m.
Just following
I say 10 a.m.
The circadian rhythm, like with one, trying to make sure that when it's dark, you should be falling asleep.
Yeah.
And when the sun comes up, hopefully you are getting up. But also that a big way to help the body cope and deal with stress is to also follow that in the pattern of food. If you know your body's in a bad way, you need to get up and eat some nourishing things. Hopefully not eating breakfast at 3 a.m. And then also you're not eating all the way until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. That's not helping the body function in the way that it biologically, like it understands is like, this is ease.
Yeah, there's a reason why the sleep hormone is the actual rest and digest, the fight or flight is associated with cortisol. Rest and digest is associated with your sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system. I always get those ones confused. Regardless, that's what it is. So that way you're able to utilize one while the other one is at rest, and vice versa. That makes sense?
Yep.
So you mentioned the rest and digest. Like, that is the one state of physiological being that we as people should be in more often, right? The fight or flight's only when you need it, right? But honestly, our
people live in it.
Yeah, people live in the fight or flight mode, and that's it. And that's what is controlled by cortisol.
Right.
So that just perfectly explains, in my mind, what all of it is.
Yeah.
You live in a state of stress, fight or flight. Why wouldn't you crave crap, right?
Well, when you have that, I think to make it more...
Because crap is what will mitigate the stress. It's not healthy. It's not healthy in a lot of ways, but when it mitigates it.
Like if I see one of my children and they're playing near a road, and all of a sudden I'm feeling maybe anxious or fearful, like, is there a car coming? And you freak out, like, oh, I need to run and grab one of them. And you have that like cold sweat, feel like I'm going to pass out. Cortisol's good in that moment. It's allowed me to do what I needed to do to maybe, save a child. When you feel like that in a day, sitting at a computer, like working and stuff, that's how you know that like your body, especially like hormonally, it's not able to give you what you need to do to just function in that specific day, from everything that is honestly just manifesting and compounding on the inside.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too, because are two good examples of when cortisol should be used and when it's not supposed to be used. So that's obviously the biggest player that we see as far as why you crave stuff. Honestly, is because you live a very stressful life, and stress is good in a lot of areas. It's not meant to be sustained stress.
There's nothing like everyone wants to feel good. There's nothing wrong with wanting, like, man, I need a Snickers bar so I can like just be with it right now.
Right.
That in of itself it's not a bad response, but if we just do that too long and we don't work on and identify the root cause, your health is going to continue to deteriorate.
That brings, sorry, don't gosh dang it, I don't want to rant on different stuff. That's a perfect example.
It helps with the,
This is a perfect example of people who, it does go into our next one, but I just made me think off the top of my head that when people make a radical change in their food and they say, okay, you know what, I'm moving to chicken and broccoli, and they're like, I cannot eat enough calories. Like, that is the exact reason, is because your body's so used to sending these signals to your brain, like, we need this to get through, we need that to get through, we need this to get through, and then all of a sudden, after a day or 2 or 3 days of eating this way, they're like, well, what's going on? We have the food that we need, right? It's not almost it's not an instantaneous thing that happens. You eat one good meal and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I mean, I guess in some instances it could be, but when you live a really high stress life and you're still getting those signals, it's because that's what your body was accustomed to for a long time. But anyway, so you did actually kind of spill into a little bit to the next point of well, honestly, I could take that into both ways. My answer. Okay, so your body's sitting there, you're at their desk, and you're like, man, I need a Snickers to get with it. That kind of falls into 2 different categories for me. Your hunger hormones themselves, depending on the type of junk that you consume, especially if you are eating, we're not just talking snacking, we're talking like meals. Like your food quality and meals are really lacking. Maybe you are eating a lot of fast food. Maybe you're eating a lot of just processed food, stuff that comes out of a can, stuff that comes out of a box. I mean, you don't even have a sharp knife in your house because you don't need one. Like, that kind of dietary lifestyle, there's a great chance that your hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, really struggle to tell you when you are hungry and when you are full. And that can be very problematic because that can lead to those cravings at any time, literally any time of the day.
The more body fat an individual gains, it does. I mean, it blunts or mutes those signals, that signaling, if you will, and you're just making the matter worse and worse.
And so what I really wanted to get at with this one is, while we were talking about cravings, when you get to a point where you crave that stuff for every meal, and it's not just an isolated instance, there should be red flags popping off in your head really, really, really aggressively. Because all that fast digesting stuff, let me rephrase, all that processed food is so easy to digest, it's so rapidly available, but it's so nutrient less that your body responds more to a nutrient density than it does a calorie density, right? This is why, when you eat a full 6-ounce chicken breast, you're probably a little more satiated than when you ate a whole, I don't know,
bucket of chicken
nuggets. Exactly. So it goes off of that. Like I said, your body's the smartest thing, and you don't give it enough credit for. Your hunger hormones still are in charge of telling you when to start and when to stop. And, you can sit down with your taco 12-pack from Taco Bell and you be 6, 7, 8 through that thing, and your body's like, well, we're handling it fine. Not much here to break down, so just go ahead and keep shoving them down. And before you know it, you're 12 deep, and you're like, dang, I need some Fiesta potatoes now.
I think it just hit me. I've never really thought of it this way, but when you were talking about all of that, we assume and automatically take the stance that we run on calories, and we do. That is the source of energy that our body needs. But really, the body runs on nutrients. And if nutrients are lacking, you can have an abundance of calories and still be just a mess.
It's funny to me because everybody will argue with me up and down that no, your body does run on calories. I get where you're coming from, but you fail to see it through my lens. Your body can store up to about 2,000 calories of usable and sustainable energy in the form of muscle and liver glycogen. But you want to know what else has a lot of calories in it? all the fat that's hanging off your arms. Okay, and everywhere else.
Say what?
Sorry, you gotta look at it. Okay, all the body fat that we have is a bunch of Snickers bars hanging all over us here. Okay, so you can't approach me and say, "Oh, it's the calorie thing." And you got plenty of calories.
Right.
You got to focus on nutrients because that's what your body wants to sustainably run off of. That is another podcast for another day. So the fast digesting stuff. It does play with your hunger hormones, and your hunger hormones have a hard time regulating each other because your body does run off of nutrients, okay? And your body will be signaled based on nutrients. It is, and we've talked about it before. It's the whole reason you can sit down with a bag of Ruffle sour cream and onion chips and just smash the whole bag and not even feel a thing.
Yeah, it's the more that I exercise and lift, and it's kind of like a sick game. But if I really want to like kind of check out, and then I do this, by myself or with some buddies. I love you, babe, but I'm not bringing my wife along because it's just not good for her goals or her mindset. And if I just want to eat some junk, I can put away some junk food. Because again, it's the same thing. Like you're just giving the body, my body's used to what I give it on a regular basis. And if I need to eat, 2 or 3 pieces, it's like, okay, like we're going to get some nutrients in here at any time.
Yeah. Here's another example. Last night we had some, that's a ground turkey that had a peanut sauce on it. I got a really cool peanut sauce. We're kind of fans of that. And we'll make tacos of it. But honestly, all I did is I took half of a iceberg lettuce head, cut it in half, shredded it, put it in a bowl, and I put that meat on top of it with you're gonna think this sounds really weird, sour cream, tomatoes, and cilantro, and I just mix it up and I ate it like that. And I was like, this is fantastic. And my wife saw me, I was done with it, and she goes, is that like all you're eating? And I was like, I feel completely satiated. I feel great. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Whereas in her mind, she's like, I've literally watched you eat 2 large pizzas to yourself before. Like, you don't need more.
Right.
That was much more nutrient dense.
For sure.
And there's my case in point for anything right there.
Yeah.
It's like nutrient density trumps calories in a lot of ways.
Right. Well, and even, sorry, don't want to continue to beat the dead horse, but like when we, and I know you've struggled with this or dealt with this before too, like if I have a client and they're like, I have a lot of salads at lunch. I'm like, look, I'm all about the salad. I'd rather you have just a little bit of the spinach and kale or whatever and have a ton of veggies that you put on top of that thing and some meat.
I used to send people.
Not a big thing of lettuce.
I used to send people like, no, this is a salad. And you couldn't even see any lettuce or spinach or anything. It's just one huge chicken breast or something, or a steak or something. Okay, so all right, so let's move on from that one. So so fast digesting carbs, little to no effort in the gut, so it's very quickly absorbable, but so low in total nutrients that your body, from a hunger standpoint, your hunger hormones, they're not like, are we full? Are we not? Should we keep eating? Should we stop? It is quite the erratic action of those hormones, and that can be really problematic. And very well at the end of the day, could lead you to another just isolated craving. Yeah. But definitely, if you crave those things, that poor food throughout the day, you should definitely have some red flags popping in your head.
Yeah.
So the last one that I have on here, and the last one that I really wanted to talk about is one of the bigger reasons outside of a physiological explanation that you crave terrible food is the fact that you are told to crave terrible food. And what exactly do I mean by that, James?
The marketing out there, it's everything comes down to simplicity. And if what I'm about to say, if you don't like it, it's just the truth. Simple isn't always the best, and honestly, very seldom is it
very seldomly
the best thing. Just pursuing simplicity. I'm still alarmed by all of the like the clients that I'll work with, and they don't cook at home. Like, I don't understand how you reach your health goals and then your fitness goals and ultimately, more than likely, your aesthetic goals if you're not cooking food at your house. So where I'm going with this, we're told, magazines, social media, internet, workplaces, whatever, you need to be able to do this in a day for your busy life, to have said things with your career, with your work, with your money, and you don't have time for all of this other stuff, especially cooking. cooking. So because of that, here are the things that you do in fact need to make sure that you still can eat in the course of a day.
Right.
To work.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. Right. So advertising of food not only showcases a specific product, but when the product is identified within, let's use a commercial for example, you figured out what the product is. Now the rest of that commercial is to figure out a way to make you understand that you need it. Otherwise, what the heck is the purpose of a commercial?
Right.
I read somewhere that the average Super Bowl is 20 minutes of actual action of playing football on TV. The rest is all highlights and replays. And then I want to say they said 60, let's say an hour and a half is purely commercials, of which 70% are food related or consumption related of something.
Yeah.
So how are you supposed to combat that, right? How am I supposed to look at that dude eating a Dave's single with his French fries next to him and be like, man, he looks really happy. Right. I bet I'd be happy if I had a single cheeseburger too. You know what I mean?
Again, I'll throw the truth bomb out there. What you see in commercials is not what you see in real life.
No. And I got something really bad to say of something that I experienced the other day, but I just don't feel like I would be a good person if I talked about it. So I'll tell you about it later because I immediately just thought of that real life scenario. Anyway, so you have these commercials that what's the word I'm looking for? Show this picture perfect scenario that you can see yourself in, where you're like, if I had that, this is what I need. But I'm yet to see a commercial that shows somebody so lively and full of life because they spend more time in the kitchen with stuff that they made by hand, or there's no commercials out there for.
People will celebrate that.
Yeah.
If a person cooks a meal, they're like, look what I did on Instagram. I was just thinking in my head, I don't know when I ever saw such and such restaurant and they're like, hey, when you're pounding your cheeseburger, take a selfie and that doesn't exist.
No. And so it is all backed by, a lot of emotional attachment to food. Social media is terrible in this instance because there are actually restaurants that encourage you to hey, take a selfie with our food and share it. And, people will be like, oh, I want to go to that place with the cheeseburgers that are 12 feet tall and, eat them. So a lot of what we have to deal with in today's age has a lot of great uses for it, but it has some catastrophic effects to our health. The bottom line is when you crave a blizzard at 9 p.m. it's because you've been told to crave a blizzard at 9 p.m. right? It's these things don't just come up because our body just happens to know what a blizzard is and it's hey, this is gonna be pretty good for us. No, this is constantly being fed to you through advertisement, through commercials, through social media, through, oh look, my friend went and got Dairy Queen. You know what? We haven't had Dairy Queen in a while. That sounds really good. That kind of stuff happens. Yeah. So you get cravings because that stuff is around. Now, can you get rid of all of it? No. It would be impossible to get rid of all of it. Now, I got rid of all my social media and I've removed myself pretty well, and I think it helps. But you can't not go to a sporting event and see Coca-Cola signs everywhere.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can't go to a wedding and there not be beer everywhere. It's you're constantly being fed this imagery of this is what I need to partake in because this is what I've been told I need to do. Yeah. And it leads down a long road of just random cravings.
Yeah. All day.
Well,
you just you associate everything with
that's really the
some
word I was
type
for.
of
association.
Of food. And I think what I do, I'm not gonna lie, when I'm driving in the car and I'm with my family, my wife and my 3 boys in there, and I'll drive by something, I'm like, man, that sounds pretty good. I don't say it out loud, but then I usually immediately what I do. So if this helps you out,
kind of nudge your wife and be like, hey. kids go to bed.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking to myself, that really does sound good, but my children later on this evening from the sugar or whatever, like wanting to punch each other's eyes out, that doesn't sound so good. So we're going to not.
We're going to drive on past, right? So we figured this podcast would be a good follow-up to the one that we did 2 weeks ago because, obviously if you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to it. We basically gave everybody permission to go have a Dairy Queen Blizzard. Just move on and be done with it.
Yeah.
But now we wanted to kind of take a step forward and say, no, but why are you having those cravings and how can you identify it? I mean, everything that we kind of discussed here, you can make some conscious effort towards in some light. Okay, if you realize that your life is incredibly stressful, you find periods of de-stressing, whether you find a hobby that takes your mind off things, or you find a way to better utilize your health in the workspace. I don't know, any of those things. I mean, that can be helpful. If you're somebody that's like, okay, my cortisol levels are just too high at night because I drink caffeine throughout the day, like, there's an easy thing you can do.
Yeah.
My cravings are bad because I don't cook. I resort on fast food because my life is so at pace. Like, we can identify a lot of things, and you can make steps and effort to improve those things. And it might not happen overnight, but one step forward is better than 2 steps back any given day. So that's kind of where we wanted to go with this podcast today. A little bit of physiology stuff, a little bit of personal insight. Obviously, we deal with this too. We're human.
Right.
Obviously, I'm more of the salt guy. Like I said, you like the sweets. I would smack a cake out of a grandma's hand at a wedding, but if she had a plate of nachos in her hand, I'd help her to her seat. That's just kind of how I am and how I'm wired. But we got back into figuring out why that probably developed, right? And I can look back and kind of connect some dots and realize that, well, that's just kind of how I was raised. Nothing wrong with that. But now I have to figure out how to live with that.
Right.
So anything else you wanted to add to this one?
I think to kind of put in summary, one of the hardest things talking in any realm of nutrition, like what I've kind of been wrestling with the last couple months, in some individuals, they don't like this because they do want the simplicity, they want the easy button. But really what it all boils down to is you have to learn how to be in tune with your body. And if you're not, you're not going to make your decisions are always going to be based on what Facebook says, what your advertisement says, what Dr. Oz says, what your boss at work says, because you just have all this stuff coming at you, and you don't know who you are and what your body in fact needs and what's causing specific things because you don't listen to it
ever.
And that's kind of a place where individuals have to really wrestle with that and start to understand, right, well, what does my body need? What has caused said thing? And like, how do we,
Man, I think I had that conversation with somebody earlier today. Yeah, it's like, you're designed to know what your body says when it talks to you, and your body talks in very specific ways. Like, when you have a headache, your body is talking to you. That's not just something that happens. Same thing goes for muscle cramps. People's like, oh, I'm getting old, I just get cramps in my leg. That's not right. Like, it doesn't just happen. Like, it's your body's telling you things. And so you should know how to identify what your body is saying through the feedback that it gives you on a given day, and be able to look back and make adjustments and figure out why is it this way or why is it not this way. Look, a well-tuned and lubricated engine is going to run flawlessly for a certain amount of time. There's just nothing that can impact that except for real environmental stuff, right? Your body's the same way. Like, if it is well tuned up, nothing is going to happen unless a stimulus from the outside essentially makes it change. And for some people, learning how to navigate that feedback is pretty challenging. Some people don't get feedback for X amount of days, before they're, I think my body's finally starting to respond to my new style of eating or my new exercise or my new regimen or whatever the case is. But biofeedback is a huge thing that everybody should be able to do, and there's a lot of people that can't.
Yep.
Because of the food quality. So, I don't know. That was a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Different stuff on there. We'll kind of weigh some options here. I got some Q&A stuff stacking up in my inbox that we might go ahead and tackle here in the upcoming weeks for another podcast. But hope you guys enjoyed this one. It can get a little lost in the weeds as far as when you're talking hormones and cortisol and all that fun stuff. But nonetheless, I think we hit it pretty good.
We did.
Pretty good.
Triple.
Happy with it?
Yeah.
All right, guys. We're going to hang this thing up. Appreciate all you guys for listening or watching on YouTube. Until next time, this is Silver Bullet Podcast.